Hello and welcome to the Business Pulse International channel on this segment called Leading Edge, where we bring you the personal stories of accomplished business people as well as top executives who share with us on their reflections on what it is that they believe it takes to be successful. My name is Dominic Gaubebe. Our special guest today is a dynamic young man. He is a mover and shaker that was recently appointed as the Chief Executive Officer of Fundi, formerly known as Eduloan. He's got 12 years experience in the field of banking, travel services, insurance, as well as educational finance. He's also held various roles insofar as being a finance manager for organizations such as First National Bank and Standard Bank, and is also a graduate of Mill Park University in his qualification with an MBA. He has more than 12 years experience in the banking, travel services, insurance, as well as educational finance sectors. He's a graduate from Mill Park Business School where he holds his MBA. And in his early years, he was a finance manager for organizations such as First National Bank as well as Standard Bank. Since then, he's seen exponential growth in his career, having held various leadership positions in organizations such as the American Express Travel South Africa, as well as being the general manager of Old Mutual IWIS, where he played an integral role in the operational capability of that organization. He's also the executive chairman of the Seed South Africa, which is an organization that was formed in order to influence and develop leadership in the sectors of corporate, social, as well as the political landscape. Amasi Mwela, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me, Dominic.
I think, number one, it's an absolute honor to have you sitting in front of us. And I'm sure there's a lot of nuggets of wisdom that we'll be able to draw, that people can be able to learn from and apply within their learnings. The one thing that's obvious, and I want to get that right out the bat from the beginning, you are probably one of the youngest CEOs in the country. And may you share a bit of your story and how it is that all of this got started?
So I started my career probably about 12, 13, maybe 14 years ago. So slightly before that, I was, believe it or not, a waiter at a restaurant in Midrand. So about 13, 14 years ago, I didn't have a qualification to my name, and I was a waiter. But I had an opportunity to go into university. And in university, I made it very clear that I would strive to get to the top if that's where I was meant to be. So one thing I'd made very clear from the beginning is there was some sort of leadership potential that I realized quite late, I suppose, after university. But initially, everything I got involved in led to some sort of leadership role. So as soon as I graduated, before I graduated, actually, I got my first job.
Yep.
Ironically, I did research, and I'd work part-time, and at the same time, I would go in and study. So I was working sort of full-time and studying full-time at the same time for my last year. But what that got for me is it got me started quicker than most of my peers.
Yes.
So while most of my peers were graduating with degrees, I graduated with a degree and 1 year worth of experience.
That experience was behind you to be able to take you forward.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it did wonders for me, just having that 1 year advance. And I basically took it from there and built a career that seems to be yielding results finally.
Yes. Now proper. Because the one thing that I've realized is that you've been able to grow relatively quickly, you know, in a sector and within a career where black graduates, as an example, to be more specific, have often struggled to be able to enter within that economy. But you've not only entered into it, but you've really grown tremendously well within it. What do you believe are the things that you've been doing or have been able to get right that have enabled that kind of growth?
I think I've been able to be very aware of my environment. So I've been able to go into different environments and adapt. And there's nuances behind every sort of corporate environment. I think if anybody who's worked in the corporate space will tell you it's not all about your qualification. It's not all about, you know, how well you speak.
It's like I've got a degree, well done, you
exactly.
can think, and then...
Which was my initial attitude when I got in. So
yeah.
I struggled for my first 3 or 4 years because my attitude was pretty much looking around and going, I think I'm probably more qualified than most people sitting around this table. So I got out of university with a degree that had 2 majors, so almost the equivalent of 2 degrees. And that can very quickly bloat your head.
Yes.
And then it took me a couple of years to finally realize that there's a degree, which generally very few people actually care about. And then there's life experience and work experience.
Yes.
And then there's one key element that's about having the ability to almost get people to like you and want to do business with you, and in the process, getting the ability to get people to like you and want to work with you.
Yeah.
So my key thing is I've been very aware. I've learned very quickly how to be aware and be able to use the environment that you're working in, not only to your own benefit, but also to grow your career and the business that you're working in.
Absolutely. One of the stories that you shared with me previously, insofar as your personal story, and I'd like to delve into it a bit, is that you left home quite early.
Yeah.
All right. Can you share a little bit of that with us? So what was it that necessitated that decision where you left home quite early? What was it within your character or way of thinking where you saw it necessary for you to be able to stand on your own and you to be able to grow?
I think it was independence. I obviously went to boarding school. That was fun. And I went to a couple of schools in my upbringing. But the main thing for me was independence. And after, from let's say, call it grade 8 to around about grade 12, I was in a couple of different schools, and most of them boarding schools. So that ignited in me a sense of independence. I didn't really need my parents for many things, well, at least I thought so at the time. And I decided to go and explore. And this kind of gangster in me just figured when I leave, I'm not coming back.
Yes.
Not out of rebellion, but out of a need to actually want to make something of my life. And that was quite an interesting journey.
Yeah. And I think it's an important trait for anyone to be able to then be independent and make it out there on their own. Yeah, now certainly. Having gone through your corporate career, all right, so you've held various leadership positions in some very big companies and across some very interesting sectors. What would you say that you believe is the role of leadership? And I'd like you to, look at it in two ways. Number one, insofar as what you've experienced having been in your career, what you believe that the role of leaders is. And also the next one is for yourself. What do you believe that your role is as a leader within your career?
So if I go back to my beginning stages, so after about 3 or 4 years in my career, I'd realized that this thing of I'm here, I've got a degree and whatever just doesn't get you anywhere. These days, nor does I'm a hard worker, one day my boss is going to notice me and promote me.
Sure. And so, that's a tough pill to swallow.
Absolutely, especially for hardworking folk out there. You put in an honest day's job and you think this is just about it. But one thing I learned over time is you need to be very deliberate about where you're going and what it is that you want to achieve. So after about 3 or 4 years, I was kind of getting frustrated with hitting what they used to call a glass ceiling in the corporate space. And I started looking deliberately at CEO job specs. So this is literally my second job. I'm very junior.
So you've just come out of varsity. You've worked for 2 years. Yes. And now you're deciding, okay, for my next job, I'm going to look at CEO job specs and that's where I'm going to apply.
So the idea was, what facets do they look for in a CEO?
Yes.
So this was 3 or 4 years into my real working life, working in my second company. And I looked at what it felt like. I would have these days when I would just go up to the executive floor and just walk and feel the ambience, and the air conditioning was quite different up there. And I made a deliberate decision that that's where I wanted to be. And I started looking at the time. I'd look on Career Junction and look for specific job specs, and I lined them up. I think I lined them up about 5 or 6, all in and around the financial services space. And I started looking for various facets that they look for. So at the time I was in the finance space, and I started jotting down for myself, if I'm to become this in a few years' time, what sort of experience do I need to get now? So I was getting financial experience. That was a tick. And I eventually decided that this is where I'd almost anchor my career in the finance space. So accounting, you need to know your numbers, and I figured out then that if you're a CEO and you don't know your numbers, most people will just pull the wool over your head and things just happen.
Absolutely.
So I decided for the first 6 or 7 years of my career I'd focus on that. After I'd done enough of that was during my F&B time, I started having conversations within the organization to say, I think I want to move towards this. But the problem with building your career in terms of one track is people only see you as
you become a specialist. Yeah, you're the finance guy.
Exactly.
And nothing beyond that.
Exactly. And I wanted to get a little bit more leadership experience, get into phases of the business where you need to make decisions here and now. So if something comes up today, a customer is not happy about something, you need to make a decision now. Whereas in the finance space, you're looking backwards. You're looking at what happened last week, last month, last year.
So retrospectively, things have already happened.
Exactly. Which was a great experience to have, but I needed to move more into business and start making sort of businesses.
How do you drive direction?
Exactly.
Certainly.
So that's when I started.
Awesome. Now, what's interesting about the story that you're sharing, because, I mean, how many young people would sit there and look at the job specs and say, what is it that it takes to be a CEO, and how can I grow to become a person like that? I'm reminded of what Jim Rohn said. He said, success is not something you pursue. Success is something that you attract by the person you become.
Absolutely.
So when you did that process for yourself and you were able to visualize that, you then became the kind of person where actually you could be considered for these leadership positions.
Absolutely. So it was either that or I'm being delusional, right? It was either that or I'm just sitting down and hoping one day this thing just bumps into me. And from what I could see then, this thing wasn't going to happen by itself.
Sure.
So there has to be a way in which I'm able to do this. So getting the actual skills to be able to do it and getting the appropriate experience was one thing. But how do you then convince people that despite the fact that I'm a finance guy, I can now move to another organization and run an operations department, or I can do relationship management, I can do sales. And I think that's where a lot of people get stuck.
Sure.
But before I made any move, I made sure I did sufficient research for the next kind of area of business.
You become ready whilst you're still in the role that you're in.
And learn the language. So yes, I'm a finance guy, but if I want to move into ops, I would go into the operations department and learn the language that they speak. Ops has got a language, marketing has got a language, sales has got a language, finance has got a language, and now I can speak just about all the languages. And recently I'm learning how to speak IT language.
No, certainly. No, that's incredible. Because the one thing from a human resource management, so I'm thinking of young professionals that are currently within companies. They've grown quite disillusioned because they're saying, I've got the qualification, I'm working hard, my career doesn't seem to be going anywhere, my manager is not promoting me. What advice would you have, or what guidance can you provide to then say that those that are currently within their careers and they're feeling stuck, what is it that they need to do in order to be able to move themselves forward?
So for me, education is twofold. So there's education that we normally take into the classroom and so on, and then there's education about your environment. So there's education in the classroom that teaches you, just basics on how the world should work. And then there's real education in the experience space, and that teaches you how the world actually works. Most people focus on the education of the classroom, how the world should work, and nobody actually looks at every environment you go into and go, how does it work? What do the power dynamics in this organization look like? What sort of people should I be interacting with in this organization to actually get some sort of influence? And often we are so stuck in ourselves and what we know and who we think we are. And that bloatedness that goes to our heads sometimes stands in the way of actually making it in the corporate space. So I would say not enough people focus on the environment that they're in. A lot of people focus on me, who I am, where I come from, who I hang out with, what I do and what I don't do. When the really important thing is to look at what's around you and take an interest in what other people do, who other people are, what makes them tick. Then you're able to meet that kind of person halfway. You're able to work better with that person.
You can solve their problem.
And more so, your boss. So a lot of people go and develop very loose relationships with their boss that don't really build confidence in them. So I've just taken time to understand the people I work for, to make sure I serve the people I work for, to a point where, to this day, just about every single boss I've worked for has almost become a friend of mine. Many years later.
Because it's a relationship that was built with them.
Yeah.
Certainly. In the space that you're in with Fundi, so you do educational finance. So you provide financing for people to be able to receive their qualification and then be able to enter the world of work or the world of business. We are in a time in South Africa right now, and it's not only in South Africa, but we're seeing quite an international trend where students are demanding from their governments, where students are demanding from their leaders to then say, we demand free education, give us a chance in order for us to be able to make it in life. So when you're in the business of providing financing for education, how does the current situation impact your business model, firstly? And then secondly, what do you see as the future of educational finance?
So this has been a learning experience for everybody. I think to say only for Fundi would be a little bit narrow, but it's been a learning experience for everybody across the space. Government, I'm sure, has learned quite a few lessons in the space. There's been the academics, there's been the academic institutions. And to be honest, very few people actually know what the answer to the future model looks like. So for us, we started working on this about 1.5 years ago. So I came into Eduloan at the time, just over a year ago. And I quickly became CEO, just as Fees Must Fall was starting,
Yes.
ironically.
That's what we call the hospital pass.
Exactly.
Wonderful
So,
to take over now.
but it was quite an interesting
Yeah.
transition. So I sat there on day one, I kind of looked around and I thought, oh dear, what do we do now? But I pulled the team together and we started thinking around, so fees must fall aside. I think for me, a critical thing was looking at my own experience in university, looking at my own sort of background, and looking at my background where my father was one of 10 kids, for instance. And out of those 10 kids, he's the only one that got an education. And he got an education because the Catholic Church at the time believed in him and his ability,
Yes.
his academic ability so much that they sponsored him through his high school, literally. Got really good grades. They sponsored him into his first year of university, and eventually from there they took him overseas to actually go and study.
So that just changed the trajectory of his life, essentially.
It changed the trajectory of his life, but I think more importantly, it changed the trajectory of mine and my 4 other siblings. So there's 5 of us. All of us at least have a degree.
Yes.
All of us are very well settled, and my siblings actually living all over the world at this point, doing their own thing. The last born's a medical doctor. She's just graduated, and everybody pretty much has a decent life. But that all came from a decision that he made to actually get an education. Sure. The life we live now versus the life my cousins live is very, very different.
Different realities.
All because of that one thing. So when I joined the education space, I was very conscious of the fact that my life was a beneficiary of somebody getting an education, perhaps my father. My kids will never know what that sort of life was like, right? And so I went into this space with that understanding. I went into this space to produce more people like my father. I went into this space to be able to help many, many more graduates to be able to change the trajectory, not of them only, but their families. And I think that's how you build.
You actually impact generations.
Exactly.
Not just the
That's literally how you build a country. It's literally how you build family. It's one family at a time. So the questions I started asking were around, so we've given all these loans over years. We've given 850,000 loans in 20 years. 5 billion rand, quite impressive. But where are these people?
What are they doing?
What are they doing now? How many are medical doctors? How many are teachers, engineers, chartered accountants? And at the time, we didn't have those answers. And for me, that became problematic. How many people actually passed first year and went into second year? We don't know, because the relationship we had with our customers largely was, you took out a loan with us, have you paid, haven't you paid?
We connect.
I found that very transactional, and I found that very light in terms of dealing with our customers. So we took it on a journey now to try and answer not only the fees must fall issue, but when customers interact with us, do they stand a much better chance of making it in life? So the new strategy, and that's what obviously brought about the name change. The new strategy was one that pretty much says, if you come and interact with us, you should stand a much better chance of making it not only in the education space, but in life.
Absolutely. Because you then provide the ecosystem. We're not just 100%. A transactional organization, but we will support you until it is that you qualify.
So when grade 8s are making decisions, how do they make them? When they're making career decisions, how do they make them grade 8, grade 9, subject choices? University, where to study, what to study, psychometric testing. While you're in university, what sort of support do you need? You came from a different area to Joburg, are you fitting in okay?
Absolutely.
Do you need textbooks? Do you need laptops? What else do you need? And eventually when you graduate, how can we help facilitate to get you into a job?
Fantastic.
That's a different value proposition to giving loans. And I must say, since our launch, it's been very positively received in the market.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now, I really wish you guys all the best, because I think the work that you're doing in that sector is really quite incredible.
Thank you.
Any parting notes that you may have? So whether you're speaking to anyone that's within corporate environment currently, they're saying, I aspire to be like yourself, or they're currently a business owner or an aspiring business owner, insofar as, either mindset or just a nugget of wisdom that you can leave with them as a parting shot.
So I know what it takes in the corporate space. I know what it's like to be a young black person in the corporate space. I understand how much struggle we tend to go through. And I think for me, a key thing is the power to change this thing is literally in your hands. And I think a lot of us default towards being a victim of the scenario. I made a very conscious decision to say, irrespective of what my environment is, what I can control is one thing. I can control myself, and I can control how I respond.
Yes.
So I think to almost become a victim of the situation is very disempowering to self. And it's something I've made a conscious decision never ever to get. So be it at this stage in my career, be it in the other aspirational things that I want to do for the future and so on, I make sure that I take control of my life. It's my responsibility to do that. And my encouragement to anybody that's out there is it's not all lost. If I was a waiter 14 years ago, if I can do this now, anybody can do it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Amasi, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And with that, we concluded with Amasi Mwela. So the principle is very clear. For anything to happen in your life, you need to take 100% responsibility. It's not the government, it's not your teachers, it's not your parents or your jealous friend that will prevent you from being able to attract the success that you wish to have in your life. So please join us again on Leading Edge as we bring you top executive, top business people that are sharing with you their actual stories. This is life experience that will help you move from where it is that you are to where it is that you want to be.